Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Nigel Farage's first little brush with parliamentary scrutiny, as he's got less than 2 weeks to submit his financial details. Now, I'd talked about this in passing during the election campaign, but as I see the New European have got an article on the matter, and we're just days away from seeing how Farage plays it, it's worth maybe revisiting, if for no other reason than to potentially warn you, you may need some more popcorn in later this year. Because as the article explains, Nigel Farage chose to stand as an MP late in the day. The default position was considered to be Sunak would call the election in autumn, which I'm going to remind people I kept saying would make no sense. But that's what people believed, including maybe Nigel Farage. This would have conflicted with at least the US presidential campaign, if not the election itself, and Farage had made it clear he prioritises the US election over anything happening in the UK. Of course he does, worth more money. In other words, he would not have stood as an MP had the election been held this autumn, because he'd been stateside. Now, if we work on the assumption that this was Farage's thinking, we don't know that, but let's work on that assumption. That would suggest he had no long-term plan to stand as a candidate in this election, that it was very much last minute. But now that he has stood and indeed won, he faces all of the rules that MPs have to follow. That means he has to declare his earnings, business interests and so on. Only it's not enough to have to report them from now on. He has to do so for the last 12 months before taking office as well. It's been speculated that Farage may not have thought about this. Perhaps he was even unaware he would have to do so. After all, how many people are aware that new MPs have to declare their financial dealings for the period before becoming an MP as well as while they're in office? And this isn't about voyeurism. It's not about finding out where Farage is getting his money from, how much it is, and whether his financial dealings are in line with the public image he projects to his supporters, although that will inevitably be a line taken by many of his political opponents. The reason MPs have to declare these details is not to satisfy nosy Parkers, but a vain attempt to make sure MPs have honest financial dealings. Yes, I know it doesn't seem to work brilliantly, but that's mostly because where certain politicians have questionable financial conflicts of interest, and by certain politicians I mainly mean Tories, the media will largely look the other way. There's often evidence for it, the media just aren't interested in bringing it to the attention of the public. But Nigel Farage is a very notable character, and he is a thorn in the side of the Tories. So some of the Tory media at least would relish the chance to expose him, and crucially, there's probably a good chance that there's something to expose. There may well be financial details he'd like to hide. I'm not suggesting he's doing anything illegal, but there may well be details he'd like to hide. The question is, how determined is he to hide them? According to the New European, he has stakes in a number of businesses which are doing very badly. Well, a businessman who makes heavy losses is maybe not the best person to listen to on running the national finances. Why do you think the orange one likes to hide his business dealings? It would also emphasise the fact that he owns Reform UK. That it's not really a proper political party. It's a business with Nigel Farage as the majority stakeholder. And also that even as a business, it's also making heavy losses, so maybe not getting the strong public backing he tries to claim. We also find out who has been paying him for visits to other countries, how much taxpayer money is now being used to let him keep going to America to beg the orange one to see him. It's been over a week now. I gather Farage has still failed to get an audience with his so-called friend. You know, all those people justifying his behaviour. Oh, he's just checking up with his close personal friend. He's just been attacked. It's like, well, why hasn't he seen him then? It's all very embarrassing. But I bet that'll be costing the British taxpayer a pretty penny as well. It's one thing for MPs to make international visits to discuss important matters with counterparts in other countries who might have some useful wisdom to share. You know, that's beneficial. Paying for a holiday where Farage just looks more and more pissed off by the day because the orange one won't see him is entertaining, but I don't think it's worth the public money. We can see him looking miserable in Clacton for no extra money at all. So if Farage doesn't fancy submitting his financial details, well, what can he do? Well, this is where it might get spicy. The first obvious step is to simply not submit them, or submit something which has glaring omissions. Obviously, this will be picked up on, although it buys him some time, because this specific aspect of his finances won't represent fiddling expenses. I don't think there's any criminal jeopardy for him. So if he continues to refuse to play ball, The Standards Committee will launch an investigation, potentially recommend a suspension. I don't know whether it would be the magic number of the 10 days required to trigger a recall petition, but let's say it is, or let's say it eventually ramps up to that because he gets his suspension, comes back, still doesn't submit them, you know, it carries on, it escalates. And let's say he faces recall. I could see Farage going full MAGA, claiming it's all a witch hunt by the deep state to kick him out of Parliament, and the people of Clacton still back him. Because even if he's recalled, there's nothing to stop him standing in the by-election. It just keeps him out of Parliament for a couple of months. And the thing is, I see the voters of Clacton doing exactly that. I don't want to get too deep into the consequences of certain behaviours when Farage may well introduce us to more unprecedented actions, and I'm not an expert on standards procedures here, but from what I can gather, if Farage simply refuses to publish his financial dealings properly, he can be suspended, maybe recalled if enough voters in Clacton sign the petition. Nothing to stop him standing again, nothing to stop the voters electing him again, you know, to show the establishment like they did in the first place. Parliament can continue to insist that he still has to declare his financial dealings, but I'm not aware of any sanction other than, well, we'll just suspend you again. And if Clacton voters keep going, well, we'll just vote him back in again. You'd end up with a completely farcical stalemate. It will make us look ridiculous again. And we're trying to move on from that. We're trying to stop our country looking ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying this will happen. Maybe the authorities can make things uncomfortable enough for Farage that he actually just complies. Although I'd be very surprised if he does it the first time of asking. I think he'll have to be pressured. But let's say Farage does make this into some personal crusade, and we know that after the Coutts banking fiasco, he's both willing and capable of doing so, to hide his financial dealings, then that would force Parliament to choose. They would have to choose between backing down to Farage, which would only empower similar behaviour not only on his part, but the part of MPs who feel their electorate will back them no matter what, as well as giving a populist a win, or toughen the sanctions by making failure to declare finances properly an actual criminal offence with suitable penalties. Will Farage take on the system? And if so, will he win? Or will the system fight back? Because that system is now loaded with Labour MPs, the vast majority of whom do not have dodgy financial dealings that they need worry about criminal sanctions for. So will the system fight back here and actually grow stronger as a result of yet another good chap's theory being blown out of the water? We'll have to wait and see. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.